Thanks for having me.
Always great to have you, Thom. So Thom has an amazing life story. We'll talk more about that today. He's a Navy SEAL. He now has a coaching program, and he's written 2 books. And the books he's written are fantastic. They're some of my favorite reads. So tell me the genesis of Unbreakable.
Well, it came out of a request from my wife, Stacy. So I was in the SEAL teams for about 23 years, or not about 23 years. And my final deployment as a platoon chief, where you're kind of in charge of the platoon, I had 22 guys under me. We were to go to Afghanistan.
Right.
And she'd asked me, it's not like when you go on a vacation when you're,
Right.
like you go on a vacation,
Right.
your wife doesn't ask you, hey, write down things in case you die. So
Right.
Stacy had said, hey, write some notes to me and the kids about your life and things you want them to be able to know in case you die. So that was the genesis of Unbreakable.
Right.
And it's a story of a deployment that I had in 2009, more of a raw conversation between Stacy and I. And what I was learning from the kids or about myself that I wanted the kids to be able to know.
Right.
And inside of it are what I call the 13 lessons of life, that if you learn these lessons, your life gets transformed. And I didn't intend it to be 13 lessons, but each chapter ends with a lesson that I was wanting my kids to learn. And I asked people who read the book, hey, what do you think about the lessons? Oh, are there lessons in there? I'm like, okay. They just like all the blood and gore and
stories,
foul language.
Yeah. She would tell you, don't be afraid. When she would say that, she said it makes you weak, right? Fear makes you weak. So when you heard that, how'd that make you feel?
Well, I think I heard it the night before deployment was Stacy and I, in a rather risque adult conversation.
Right.
And it's tense because I don't know if I'm going to come home, and you could probably smell the tension. And instead of having intimacy, we're just sitting looking at each other, not knowing what to say. And she's like, hey, Thom, don't fear dying. It makes you weak. And I want you to fight your way home to us, because I like the notion of fighting my way out of something.
Right.
And it kind of relieved a lot of the tension that I had.
Wow.
And then later in the deployment, we were getting our asses beat. And we'd been overrun by the Taliban. And I'd been kind of blown up, laying on the ground, feeling weak again. And I swear to God, Stacy's voice jumped in my head going, hey, don't fear dying. It makes you weak. I want you to fight your way home.
Wow.
And that rallied me emotionally.
Right.
And even though I had some injuries, but I rallied emotionally because, when you're down emotionally, you're done.
Right,
and,
no doubt.
And that was, I tried to capture that in the book somehow.
You did. How does, not fear dying translate into what you do today for coaching people and helping them find the better version of themselves?
Oh, that's a deep dive. So in coaching people, I realized that everybody has 5 fears. Fear of death is one, like physical harm. In the physical space, we fear dying. In the intellectual space, we fear that somebody's going to find out that we're stupid. That's one of our biggest fears intellectually. Right. In the wealth space, loss. And you see that all the time in your business. People fear loss, so they don't engage. In relationships, we're afraid to be alone, so we never get fully invested in a marriage or any friendship. We don't go full in. And spiritually, our biggest fear is that we are powerful. So those 5 fears. And the fear of dying one gets killed in the SEAL teams. They make you encounter the fear of death probably once a week from training until you retire. So once you encounter, God, man, you're going to threaten to kill me all the time. I'm just going to engage anyway. So I don't care if you're going to shoot me, you're going to beat me up. I'm going to play as much as I can in this, physical space of being a SEAL. So what would life be like? What I found out, to be able to teach people, you should spend an inordinate amount of time facing everything that you're afraid of. Like fear of public speaking to
Right.
somebody who stutters. They're
Right.
never going to, well, just start speaking. Who cares what comes out,
Right.
you know?
Yeah.
And that fear prevents people from doing great things, those 5 fears.
Oh yeah. In reading your book, you have a unique methodology, something that I just haven't seen before. And one of the things you talk about is taking a group of people and going on a 24-hour walk. But talk to me about you doing it by yourself, 24-hour walk, and what's the significance of doing it with other people, and what happens during that 24 hours?
Well, it came from the SEAL teams and how they teach you to deal with your, I guess in the business world called a mindset. So the first thing they teach you about patrolling is we're just going to walk and watch how your brain cascades into hell.
Right.
All we're going to do is walk.
Right.
And you have on your gear. So that process that they taught in the SEAL teams, I realized could be taught. So it's like take on a big endeavor. And then, so my experience of it, I had to do it 3 times to accomplish it myself. My first experience of it, when I was really athletic and I was training to do 600-mile races. So I'm like, well, man, I got to figure out how to keep moving for 24 hours because I've never really done that before without having instructors yell at me.
Right.
So I went out and you get demoralized. You're sitting there by yourself with your own thoughts going, fuck, nobody's watching.
Right.
Nobody will know if I did it anyway.
Right,
so
right.
around the 18-hour mark, I'm like, okay, I got enough out of this. I'm done. And I realized, man, I didn't do 24 hours. So then I got enamored with what is going on inside of my brain that physically I'm okay, but I just talked myself out of going the last few hours. So the second time I did it, I was committed to doing it. The day before I got a fever, like, oh, I'm going to go.
Right.
And 12 hours into it, I'm like, I'm actually doing damage to myself. Like I felt like I was hallucinating at the 12-hour mark.
Right.
I'm like, I'm out here by myself. I could fall over and nobody would ever find me.
Right.
So then I talked myself out of it again. And the third one, I'm like, wow, what I'm missing is I need help. So the third one, I had somebody meet me at the dark time. So I started at like 7 in the morning. And at dark, I'm like, hey, this is where all the demons come out anyway.
Right.
So I had a couple people come out and walk the last 10 hours with me.
Wow.
And that made all the difference. So, and that's one of the skills or lessons I wanted my kids to be able to do is you can't do hard things alone. And to learn how to actually engage for 24 hours. Physically and mentally, and it doesn't have to be fast, it doesn't have to be slow. So now having wished I had not put that in the book because people are like, hey, let's do the 24-hour.
It's like,
so
come on.
10 years ago, I'm like, okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
So we've done 3 a year for the past 10 years.
Wow.
And people come from all over. And now I break down that experience into you're going to live your life. All your life's going to come out in a day. So all the things that are stopping you from being awesome will come out. And the first quarter of the game is exciting. Everybody's getting to know each other. And if you've ever been to, the woods here in Greenville, it's actually a cool woods to walk through.
Right.
And always do it in the spring and the fall so the weather's not killing you.
Right.
And so the first quarter, everybody's happy talking about nonsensical things. And in the second quarter, you're like, my feet kind of hurt and my butt kind of hurts and I don't like walking behind Erik anymore because he belches, And,
Right.
and then it's dark time. And in the first 2 years, I would sit on the back of my truck and 2 to 3 people would always quit right at dark, right at the 12-hour mark going, I can't do this. Why? All we're doing is walking. It's not a speed thing.
Right.
But what I saw is people inside start talking themselves out of everything that they do, which is, I think, the genesis of greatness is what would you do if you stopped talking yourself out of it? And so then it's dark and you're walking behind your light. It's a cone of light. I call it the cone of hell. And you can't experience anything but that little cone of light. And then you start letting your guard down. And so the process is every hour we stop and talk about a topic. And that all the topics center around what prevents you from being the best version of yourself. And in the first bit, nobody opens up. Now it's 2:00 in the morning.
Right.
And so, hey, John, what stops you from being the best version of yourself? And from a vulnerable state, I cheat. I didn't expect that.
Right.
And then they get that catharsis of letting that go. I said, what if that wasn't this backpack that you're carrying with you all the time? And they're like, wow, I'd do things differently. What if you just stop doing the stupid shit, you know?
Right.
And then the sun comes up, and at that point, you're just, I don't care what's going on. I'm just going to make it to the next tree and make it to the next tree. And so what I think the greatest outcome of that event each time is, what if you stopped worrying about anything? You just kept making it to the next tree, whether it's in business or relationships or so you have a blow up. Okay, tomorrow's a new day. What if you just keep moving, even if it's not at the speed you want or with the amount of money you want? What if you just keep engaged?
Right.
So, and that's a beautiful skill, and it comes out in 24 hours.
What's the difference? What did you learn about being independent? Because everyone wants to be independent, and then you realize that there's strength in interdependence. So how do you delineate that in your mind?
I wish somebody had never told anybody to be independent, to run things solo. And there's truth to it. If you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go long, you have to have a team.
Right.
If you want to do something hard, you'll never do it by yourself.
Right.
So the solo aspect or the independent aspect, how I frame that out due to the experiences that I've had, is independently you have to execute. Nobody's going to drink the tea for me. I have to actually do things independent. For me to do it repetitively during difficult times, I need either a support group or a team that reinforces this is the right thing to do. So I think people should be taught codependency, which is it's a biblically wrong term.
Right.
Like I'm dependent on my wife.
Right.
Things will go a different way without her. They'll go some way, but they won't be great without having people that you're codependent on.
Right. Now you refer to her in your book, and I think she has some social media as referred to as Spartan wife or Spartan woman.
Spartan woman, yeah.
So what does that mean to you? And what is a Spartan woman?
It's if you'd seen what was it, the 300? Is that the?
Oh yeah, 300, right.
When the woman demands the Spartan warrior to come home on your shield or carrying it.
Oh.
I think a woman should embrace whatever the man is doing. They don't get a choice if he wants to, unless it's stupid stuff, but if he wants to be a warrior, embrace it. If he wants to be a car salesman, not that that's different, but embrace it. Don't want something from your spouse that they aren't fully engaged in. And to me, that's the Spartan woman phenomenon, that we don't debate each other. If I want to go do something, she's fully behind it. Or if she's not fully behind it, I'm out.
Right.
So that, to me, is the distinction of Spartan woman.
Oh, that's powerful.
Not that she's can lift a house. That's different. It's Herculean.
Right. Herculean. That's another one. And you wrote a second book, which I also enjoy, called 3 Simple Things: Leading During Chaos. Well, if there's something we're seeing a lot today in business, economics, it's home life, all kind of life is chaos. So, what's the essence of this, and what are the 3 simple things?
Everybody lives in chaos and complexity. Another way to look at that, there's always a million things going on. And the more aware of that you are, the more the million know there's like 5 trillion things.
Right.
And what I learned in the SEAL teams, and they do this by beating it into you, is all you can really do is one thing. Don't focus on 5,000 things. Focus on one thing. So I found myself, how do I teach people how to break something complex down to simple? And you must do that well, otherwise you wouldn't be successful. People who are successful have broken down something extremely complex and a few things that they can do well. Like even the guys that are filming here, they don't do everything well. They do 2 things well, and then they hire somebody else to do another 2 things well. And so that was how to break something that's extremely complex into something simple. And then I found out that I think the 5 areas of life, your health being one, your intellectual capacity another, wealth is another, your relationships are another, and spiritual are the 5 areas. No matter how complex those may be, what are the 3 things that you have to do all the time? And I think those 5 areas, I now know those 5 areas need to be engaged every day. So the 3 simple things. You have to do something offensive every day in those 5 areas.
Okay.
In business, you have to do sales every day. In health, you have to work out every day. It's not complex.
Right. It's simple.
In intellectual, you have to learn something new every day. That's the offensive side. In relationships, actually the offensive thing in relationship is you have to listen. And people don't do that. They make it too complex. In spirituality, you have to turn on your body. You have to move your body because your body is a temple. That's the on switch. So offense, defense, and strategy are the 3 simple things. And you have to do them every day. And then in the past years, 10 years, training people to do those 3 simple things, it's lethal.
It seems to always be the simple things, the basics, right?
Do them
That drive
first
life.
before you start taking rounds from the environment.
Right.
Like do them before you go to work.
Right.
And getting people to do that has been a crisis.
It's less than simple, right?
Like,
Right.
oh
right.
my gosh,
Yeah,
stop
yeah.
talking yourself out of doing it. Just
Right.
do it. Well, I'm embarrassed. It doesn't matter if you're embarrassed. Do it.
Right.
Well, I feel old. You mean you can't work out? And the working out is the easiest of the 3 simple things.
Right.
Stretching is the most catastrophically, I'll talk myself out of stretching every day.
Right.
And eating well
Right.
is the strategy.
Oh, that's hard for people too.
And people don't do that.
No.
They literally talk themselves out of it.
Right. I've been a martial artist for 50 years, and I stretch every day. I was surprised because I do, even I try new stretches, different people show me things. And the other day I was traveling, and I did a full split. And I can still do a full split at 56. And I was just
You
like,
got
this-
that on me? I can
just-
still
it's
do that.
just because of, but just always stretching. But it's
Yep.
not natural, and I still don't like it. So, but every day
Yep.
I stretch for probably 20 minutes, right? I start my day. And if I don't, it affects me. You know, I don't
Yep.
move as well during the day. I've had injuries of back and stuff like that as you have when you do sports, but it's interesting that stretching is one of them because I've never heard anybody say that. So your day, how do you start your day? There's got to be a methodology you go through.
Oh boy.
And how do you start
It's a
your day?
billion-dollar
How do you get
question.
ahead? Yeah.
So I also think if you're going to teach something, you got to do it. Otherwise, it's not authentic. So
Right.
wake up at various times, but whenever you wake up, do your spiritual 3 simple things first.
Okay.
That is, move every muscle and joint, not a workout. But instead of getting out of bed and going and peeing and feeling stiff, get out of bed and move every single joint and engage every muscle. There are 3 exercises that do that. Push up, sit up, and squat. Every muscle and every joint will be engaged if you do that. It doesn't take a long time. You don't have to do 50, but
Right.
even if you do 1, you've already engaged that.
Right.
And you have 5 senses. Oh my God, turn your eyes on. Find a way to turn your eyes on. And I had to get a therapist to teach me how to do that well. It's look at a cross and look at an X and move your eyes through the cross and through the X.
Oh,
and
interesting.
when you sleep, your eye is elongated. So when you open up your eyes, it's not going to be in focus because it's not had to
Right.
move throughout the day or throughout the night.
Never heard that before.
So
That's
turn on your eyes,
Yeah.
turn on your ears, hear something, turn on your smell, Smell something pleasant. You want to have the experiment. Smell something pleasant for 2 days and smell something not pleasant for 2 days and how it affects you throughout the day.
Interesting.
It's brutal. So
Wow.
turn on, and then eyes, ears, the final sense, not that it's the fifth one, but brush your skin or take a shower.
Mm-hmm.
Because that sense of well-being comes from your skin.
Right.
And people don't even do that. So
Right.
they get up, drink coffee, go to work. Everything's
That's right.
stiff,
Just straight
nothing
away.
works.
Right.
And then the second most important thing is, I'm assuming that people are in a relationship. If you're in isolation, this won't be any value, is listen to your wife or husband,
Right.
speak to them, and then finally have intimacy every day.
Mm-hmm.
Those are three simple things. They only take probably 10 minutes total. It's not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And then work out for an hour, stretch for 20 minutes, and then no sugar.
Oh, wow.
Get people to not to take sugar is an emotional crisis.
Right.
That's the greatest strategy you can have in your health, is taking sugar out of your diet.
Makes a big difference.
And then in business, do sales every day, talk to a client every day, and sit down in a safe space and think about what things are going to be like in 3 years if everything works out, which what I call strategy.
Right.
And intellectually learn something new, get better at something you've already done, and think out of the box.
Wow.
Those are the three simple things.
Wow.
And I do that before I go to work,
Oh, wow. Okay.
probably before 8:30.
Okay. And how long is this whole, is like a 2-hour process, 2.5 hours, something
It
like that?
depends on how long the workout is. So I say you have to at least work out for 20 minutes. I usually do an hour. I usually wake up at 5 and get done by 8. Not everybody has the ability to do that.
Right. No doubt about that. Not everybody, they can, or
Yeah.
work shifts or whatever else. Yeah.
But it's only a 3-hour process.
Okay. But if you think about the average person spends more time deciding what version of iPhone they want, the Pro or the Max, or what type of gadget or what they're going to do than they do on planning their life. So what you're saying is every day you're purposeful with strategy, engagement, and
Yep.
defense.
Yep.
Okay, that's powerful. So as a SEAL, why did you want to be a SEAL in the first place? It seems like it's a high calling, and everyone I've talked to who's in it, that's all they want to do. But tell me, what's your story?
I
of
think
why you
it's
wanted
all
to
I
be a
ever
SEAL?
wanted to do. So I grew up with a guy named Pat Tomlinson who was, they were called like Scouts and Raiders or construction battalions in World War II. And he was one of the original SEALs with a guy named Draper Kaufman who went into Iwo Jima. So when he was 17, he was on Iwo Jima. And I grew up listening to this guy's stories, and his demeanor was probably more abrasive than most human beings. But he was thoroughly honest to his own demise. And so I'd grown up with that in the back of my mind, going, man, I like that lifestyle that I'd heard him talk about. And then I wanted to be a warrior, whatever the hell that meant to a kid.
Right.
It's different from an adult adult warrior going, man, I don't know if I would want to do this again. But,
Right.
And so I got talked out of it. Dad said,
Okay,
and
interesting.
even Pat said, you're 18, likelihood that you make it isn't there.
Right.
And he said, your maturity is not available yet because they'll beat you down mentally. So I allowed myself to get talked out of it. So not that the second course of action was lease, but I went to West Point and failed out my junior year, and went back home and talked to Pat Tomlinson, and he goes, now that you're at rock bottom, what do you want to do? He goes, I said, I want to be a SEAL. He goes, sign up.
Now you're ready. Okay, interesting.
He goes,
Okay.
the only way to do
So it
this
was a
now.
setback he saw in you, the brokenness that you're now ready where you weren't before.
He goes, nothing else is on the table.
Okay.
Like you've burned the boats, so you're going to make it this time,
Right.
which didn't make it easier, but
Right.
I didn't have anything to go back to, and then it was about a year processing it and then going through the program, which took me forever. And I'd learned not to quit. Like if you
Right.
don't have anything to go back to,
Right.
it makes you a different human being.
What's the power of not having a plan B?
then you put 100% of what's available into plan A, as opposed to 50% of what's available into plan A. I don't think any plan can exist without 100%. Even if it doesn't work, at least you now know, hey, it did not work, and I gave it all that I gave.
Right. You were saying one time we talked that every mission as a SEAL you're given is unwinnable, and you commit up front, knowing it's unwinnable, right? So how does that feel, and how do you train for that? How does somebody who's hearing this like, that sounds wild to me. I'm just commit, it's unwinnable. I'm listening to this. I want to grow as a person. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to start that business. I want to get off the sofa. I want to do whatever. Ask this person, start my life, move. How do you get there?
Well, so to answer the first question, in the teams, you're given a target that is chaotic. Like nothing, you're not given a mission by the admiral. The admiral doesn't come in and go, execute this mission. If he did, you'd probably shoot him.
Right.
Like, what do you mean? You're planning this with coffee?
Right.
You're given gray space on a mission. You may just have this person that you have to find and kill or grab, or this village that you have to clear, and it's gray. How do you do it? When you're going to do it? How much assets you need? They never tell you up front. To solve that gray space, you take it, not virtually, you actually physically take the mission and say, we're going to commit to this mission, and there's no timeline to it. Now, the round table of SEALs, I call it putting meat on the table. All right, here's the mission as we know it. Can we figure this out? They're 100% going to figure it out, or they're going to come back and go, it's not doable.
Okay, gotcha.
And so without without them being 100% committed, they won't be able to figure it out. So it's not that it's, one way looking at it is be 100% committed and do the best you can all the time. And then you'll get to a point where it's a go, no go, even in business. If you're not 100% committed, you'll just sit and engineer things forever.
No doubt.
As opposed to, we're going to make this work until we get to a critical point where I either am going to invest, I have to send assets in, or we need more information. And without commitment, 100% commitment, you'll just sit and stew on it. Well, it's like giving my 16-year-old, he's got a test on Friday. He won't start studying until Thursday.
Right.
Just because he's not wise,
Right.
In the teams, you give us a mission on Monday. We're going to start it on Monday.
Right.
And then we'll figure out the timeline from there.
Right.
And it's just a human failing until the last minute.
So speaking of training, I mean, you were a trainer in the SEAL schools, and you trained snipers. Is that right? Mm-hmm. And you ran it for, was it 2 years or 3 years?
Well, I ran it from 2010 till 2012.
Okay.
As the lead guy, as a senior chief in charge of it. But I had taught 12 courses as an instructor throughout the years.
Yeah. Right. We saw a movie, a lot of us have, of a guy named Chris Kyle, an American Sniper. And you knew Chris. And
You're a wonderful kid.
You trained him too, right?
Yep.
So, and I want to talk about that. And this was one of the commemorative Chris Kyle guns. And I think you recognize this patch, the Horseman. So would you talk to me about what it's like to train a sniper, or maybe to the extent it makes sense, Chris Kyle and the Horseman? So
the specific Chris Kyle story is the program that we run is a 3-month-long program, and when he went through, it was about a 70% fail rate.
Wow.
And he grew up in Texas hunting. And you could tell by his demeanor, he was really comfortable doing the business of being a SEAL, being behind the gun. A lot of times, little kids get behind the gun. You're like, oh my God, we're going from ground zero.
Right.
And he liked the hunting side of it. Waiting in position, the mind numbingness of waiting and waiting and waiting. He'd already learned all that. And part of the program is shooting, and part of the program is what they call stalking. Be able to maneuver under observation without being detected into harm's way and kill something. It's called the stalk. And that's where everybody fails. So, and he got hundreds all the time.
Oh, wow.
So he was more relaxed to it. And I remember watching him as an instructor. 20 kids would start, and he'd be at the start point, just kind of laying there chilling out. And he's like, I'm like, hey, you've got a 4-hour timeline. He goes, I'm just waiting for everybody to leave to see where they go, and I'm going to go the opposite direction. So if everybody goes right, I want to go left because everybody will be detected. I'm like, man, that's what I did too. And
You kind of goat in
and I was like, that's beautiful. And but as a operator, he was what I call a dyed-in-the-wool killer. Like he really enjoyed that aspect of his job, which made him very difficult to get along with if you didn't enjoy that in his personality.
Okay, yeah.
Like he would say, "You're stupid," really quickly to leadership, and it's hard for a lot of leaders that don't like break glass in case of war characters, and a lot of other things to say about Chris, but he was a great man.
Okay, fantastic. Okay. Knowing what you now know, if you were to talk to yourself, when you're, before you went into the SEALs, what would you tell yourself? And what would you tell yourself today if you talked to yourself after you left the SEALs? Because it's a big transition to go from...
Those are two different conversations for sure, yeah.
Right.
The young version of myself is, I would say, nobody ever said they trained too much.
Okay, right.
So get committed earlier and train harder earlier in life. And don't wait for anybody to teach you. Start teaching yourself the things that you think you need. And then be guided instead of taught.
Ooh, okay. All right. That's good.
And unless you've crossed the finish line, you ain't done. So the young kid, all young kids, I would say that too. In any endeavor.
Okay.
Train harder. You can sleep when you're dead. This is the thing in the SEAL teams.
Right.
And unless you're at home with mama, the mission's not done. To the old version is whatever you learned, take it into the next aspect of life quickly. And don't wait for the environment, because the environment's never going to embrace you. So anybody that's transitioning from a job, a marriage, something to another, don't wait very long. So immediately get 100% engaged in something. And I see the guys with PTSD, they don't get engaged. They knew teamwork worked.
Right.
They knew being in shape worked. They
Right.
knew, doing something that you value worked in the SEAL teams. They get out, and the environment's brutal. Nobody wants you to succeed on the outside.
No, it's very...
So just get with somebody who's committed. Doesn't matter if they're selling boxes.
Right. They're committed.
You get with somebody committed and start executing with them.
How important is gratitude in life?
That's my Achilles heel. I have to actually force myself to do that. And Stacy said that's one of my darknesses. It's not artificial, but it's real. When I do have gratitude, it changes everything. When I don't, it goes down the hole quick.
Right.
Like when I think everything is about me, which is the lack of gratitude, things don't go well. And when I didn't say thank you. I didn't,
Sure.
And I didn't do that well with my kids. And I see a lot of people don't do that well with kids.
Right.
Hey, thank you for picking up that, or
Right.
thanks for coming home early, and thanks for sharing that you had a beer, or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
And even the gracious part of the gratitude side of it is the most difficult, I think, for men to do is be grateful that you are still alive.
Right.
on a daily basis, because a lot of people aren't. I say
Right.
that
Right.
not tongue in cheek, but
Sure.
the more you articulate gratitude, the more it transforms the environment.
Oh, that's powerful. That's power.